They made her scrub toilets with her bare hands while wearing a tattered apron, laughing as she begged for basic respect. What they didn't know was that she owned every marble tile they walked on, every crystal chandelier they admired, and every designer couch they lounged across. When her stepson Marcus finally arrived home and saw what his family had done, their world crumbled in seconds. This is the story of how Maya Chen went from invisible servant to untouchable queen, and if you've ever been overlooked or treated like you didn't belong, this will change how you see everything. Maya Chen had never imagined her life would take such a dramatic turn. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, she lived a quiet existence working as a librarian at the downtown branch. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Her days were filled with organizing books, helping patrons, and enjoying the peaceful silence that came with her job. At 28, she had shoulder-length brown hair that she usually kept in a simple ponytail, kind hazel eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a wardrobe consisting mainly of cardigans and comfortable flats. She wasn't someone who commanded attention when she walked into a room, and she preferred it that way. Her life changed completely when she met David Blackwood at a charity fundraiser for literacy programs. Maya had volunteered to help set up the event, arranging books for the silent auction, while David, a successful tech entrepreneur in his 50s, was one of the major donors. He approached her table where she was carefully displaying first-edition novels, and what started as a conversation about literature turned into something much deeper. David was recently widowed, his first wife having passed away 3 years earlier from cancer. He found Maya's genuine passion for books and quiet intelligence refreshing compared to the superficial social circles he usually navigated. Their relationship developed slowly over coffee dates at small cafes and long walks through Washington Park. David was different from anyone Maya had ever dated. While he was clearly wealthy, driving expensive cars and wearing tailored suits, he never made her feel inferior about her modest lifestyle. Instead, he seemed fascinated by her perspective on life, her contentment with simple pleasures, and her dedication to helping others through her work at the library. When he proposed 8 months later with a vintage sapphire ring that had belonged to his grandmother, Maya said yes without hesitation. The wedding was exactly what Maya had dreamed of, a small ceremony in David's garden with just their closest friends and her parents who flew in from Portland. David's adult children from his first marriage, Marcus and Jessica, were traveling abroad for business and couldn't attend, but David assured Maya they would meet soon enough. She wore a simple ivory dress she'd found at a boutique downtown, and David looked handsome in a navy suit. As they exchanged vows under a canopy of roses, Maya felt like she was living in a fairy tale. After their honeymoon in Italy, Maya moved into David's sprawling estate in the hills overlooking the city. The house was magnificent, with floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood floors that gleamed like mirrors, and a kitchen larger than her former apartment. David gave her a complete tour, showing her the library he'd had custom-built with rolling ladders and first-edition collections, the art studio with perfect northern light, and the master suite with its fireplace and private balcony. He handed her the deed to the property with a smile, explaining that he'd transferred ownership to her name as a wedding gift. David's business required frequent travel, and just 2 weeks after their return from Italy, he had to leave for an extended trip to oversee the opening of new offices in Tokyo and Singapore. He would be gone for at least 6 weeks, possibly longer. Maya felt nervous about staying alone in the large house, but David assured her that his children would be returning from their own travels soon and could keep her company. He kissed her goodbye at the front door, promising to call every day and counting down the days until he could return to his new wife. Maya spent the first week alone exploring every room of her new home, reading in the library, and trying to feel settled in such a grand space. She video-called David every evening, telling him about her day and how she was adjusting to her new life. On the 8th day, she heard cars pulling into the driveway and looked out to see a red Ferrari and a black Mercedes parking near the front entrance. Her heart jumped with excitement, thinking David had returned early to surprise her. Instead, 2 people she'd never met walked through the front door using their own keys. The woman appeared to be in her early 30s, with perfectly styled blonde hair, designer clothes that probably cost more than Maya's monthly salary, and an air of confidence that filled the room. The man looked slightly younger, maybe late 20s, wearing an expensive leather jacket and jeans that somehow managed to look both casual and costly. They were clearly siblings, sharing the same sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes. The woman noticed Maya first, looking her up and down with obvious confusion and mild irritation. Maya was wearing jeans and a sweater, having spent the morning organizing David's home office, and she suddenly felt underdressed in her own home. Her expression shifted from confusion to what looked like recognition, though Maya was certain they'd never met. "Oh, perfect," the woman said, her voice carrying a tone of relief mixed with condescension. "You must be the new housekeeper Dad mentioned he was hiring. I'm Jessica Blackwood, and this is my brother Marcus. I hope you're more reliable than the last one because this place has been neglected for months." Maya opened her mouth to correct the misunderstanding, but Marcus cut her off before she could speak. "Finally," he said, tossing his leather jacket onto a nearby chair without caring where it landed. "The last housekeeper quit right before Dad left for his business trip, and we've been dealing with housekeeping services that couldn't find their way around properly. Do you speak English well, right? The last one barely understood basic instructions." Maya stood there frozen, holding a stack of David's business files she'd been organizing. The assumption stung, but more than that, she was confused about how to handle the situation. David had specifically asked her to keep their marriage private until he could tell his children himself, saying he wanted to handle the situation delicately given how much they'd loved their mother. He didn't want to betray his trust or complicate his relationship with Marcus and Jessica by blurting out the truth in this awkward moment. They surely would only be staying for a few days before David returned, and then everything could be properly explained. "I understand you're David's children," Maya finally managed to say, her voice smaller than she intended. "He mentioned you might be visiting." "Visiting? This is our home, sweetheart. We grew up here. Dad may travel constantly for business, but this house belongs to the Blackwood family. I hope you understand your place here and don't get any ideas about overstepping boundaries." The comment hit Maya like a physical blow. This was her home now, legally and officially, but she couldn't say that without revealing everything David wanted to keep private. She nodded mutely, clutching the business files tighter against her chest. Marcus pulled out his phone and started scrolling through messages. "We'll need dinner ready by 7 tonight. Nothing too fancy, just pasta or something simple. And make sure the guest rooms are prepared because we're expecting friends over most evenings. The blue bedroom needs fresh linens, and the bathroom in the hall has been making weird noises with the faucet." Jessica added her own demands to the growing list. "I'll need my laundry handled carefully. Everything goes to the dry cleaner except for my workout clothes, which need to be hand-washed and air-dried. Never put anything in the regular washer-dryer. And please be more careful about your appearance while you're working. This isn't some budget motel, and we have a reputation to maintain."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Maya felt herself shrinking with each instruction, each assumption about who she was and why she was there. She wanted to speak up, to correct their misunderstanding, but David's words about privacy and handling things delicately kept echoing in her mind. She told herself it would only be for a few days, maybe a week at most, before David returned and cleared everything up. That evening, Maya found herself cooking dinner for David's children and their friends, a group of young professionals who treated her like she was invisible except when they needed something. They discussed their jobs, their expensive vacations, and their social plans, while Maya served them pasta and salad, refilled their wine glasses, and cleared their plates. When one of Marcus's friends complimented the food, Jessica quickly took credit, saying she'd given Maya detailed instructions because hired help needed constant supervision. The days that followed established a painful routine. Jessica would leave lists of tasks that seemed designed to keep Maya busy from dawn until well past dusk. Clean the chandeliers in the dining room, organize every book in the library by publication date, scrub the marble floors in the entryway by hand because the mop left streaks. Marcus contributed his own demands, usually shouted from whatever room he was lounging in at the moment. He'd snap his fingers when he wanted fresh coffee,
point at spills he'd made and expect them cleaned immediately, and constantly criticize Maya's efforts as inadequate. Maya tried calling David several times, but the time difference made it difficult to connect, and when they did talk, his calls were often interrupted by business meetings or cut short by poor connections. She found herself downplaying the situation, not wanting to worry him while he was dealing with important business matters halfway around the world. She told herself she could handle a few weeks of difficult house guests, especially since they were his children and she wanted to make a good impression. The breaking point came during Jessica's dinner party on a rainy Thursday evening. Jessica had invited 12 people, all successful professionals from her social circle, and had spent the entire day giving Maya impossible instructions for preparing an elaborate multi-course meal. Maya had never cooked for so many people before, and certainly nothing as complicated as the menu Jessica demanded. When Maya suggested they hire a catering service, Jessica looked at her like she'd suggested burning the house down. "Absolutely not," Jessica said firmly. "We don't waste money on services we can handle ourselves. Besides, what exactly do you think we're paying you for? This is basic household management." Maya wanted to point out that she wasn't being paid anything, that she was actually the owner of the house where this dinner party was taking place, but David's instructions about privacy held her back. She spent the entire day in the kitchen, following recipes she found online and hoping everything would turn out edible. The dinner party was a disaster from Maya's perspective, though Jessica's guests seemed to enjoy themselves. Maya served each course while the group discussed topics she couldn't contribute to, their conversation filled with references to expensive restaurants, exclusive vacation destinations, and business deals worth millions. They treated her like part of the furniture, occasionally making comments about the food or asking for more wine without even looking in her direction. The worst moment came when one of Jessica's friends, a woman with platinum blonde hair and a dress that probably cost more than Maya's car, started talking about hiring household staff. "It's so hard to find good help these days," she said, gesturing vaguely toward Maya as she cleared the salad plates. "They either steal from you or they're completely incompetent. At least this one seems trainable, though I'd work on her presentation if I were you, Jess. First impressions matter." Jessica laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Oh, she's not ours permanently. Dad hired her temporarily while we figure out what we actually need. To be honest, I'm not impressed with her work so far. She's slow, she asks too many questions, and she clearly doesn't understand how households like ours operate." Maya stood frozen in the doorway to the kitchen, holding a stack of dirty plates and fighting back tears. These people were discussing her like she wasn't even human, critiquing her performance and debating her worth as if she were a piece of furniture they were considering buying. The humiliation burned through her chest, making it hard to breathe. Marcus joined the conversation from his position sprawled across an armchair. "I vote we find someone more experienced when Dad gets back. This one doesn't really fit our standards. She's too ordinary. When people visit, they expect to see staff who reflect the level of the household." The platinum blonde woman nodded approvingly. "Exactly. Your staff are a reflection of your family's status. You want people who look the part, who understand their place, and who can handle the demands of a sophisticated household. This girl seems sweet enough, but she's clearly out of her depth." Maya escaped to the kitchen, setting the plates down with shaking hands and leaning against the counter for support. The casual cruelty of their words hit harder than outright insults would have. They weren't even angry with her. They simply saw her as inadequate, disposable, not worth considering as a full human being with feelings and dignity. The evening got worse when Marcus's friend Jake, who'd been drinking steadily throughout dinner, cornered Maya while she was washing dishes. He pressed himself against her back while she stood at the sink, his hands sliding around her waist as he whispered crude suggestions in her ear about what he'd like to do with the help after everyone else went to bed. When Maya tried to step away, he grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave marks. "Don't be shy," he slurred, his breath hot against her neck. "Girls in your position should be grateful for attention from men like me. I could make your life a lot easier around here if you're nice to me." Maya managed to pull away and lock herself in the downstairs bathroom, her whole body shaking with fear and rage. She sat on the closed toilet seat, staring at the red marks on her wrist and feeling more trapped than she ever felt in her life. This was supposed to be her home, her sanctuary, the place where she'd started a new life with David. Instead, she was being treated worse than a servant by people who had no idea they were abusing the actual owner of everything they considered theirs. That night, Maya lay in the small guest room where Jessica had relegated her, staring at the ceiling and wondering how her fairy tale marriage had turned into this nightmare. David had been gone for 3 weeks, with at least 3 more weeks remaining on his business trip. His children showed no signs of leaving, and their friends had basically moved in as well, treating the house like their personal hotel with Maya as their unpaid staff. She pulled out her phone and tried calling David, but it went straight to voicemail. The time difference meant he was probably in meetings, and she realized she didn't even know his exact schedule well enough to know when he'd be free to talk. Their relationship had moved so quickly from meeting to marriage that there were still so many practical details they hadn't worked out. Maya closed her eyes and tried to remember the feeling of David's arms around her on their wedding day, the way he'd looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. That man seemed like a distant memory now, and she was beginning to wonder if she'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe she really was just an ordinary librarian who'd gotten caught up in a fantasy that was too good to be true. Tomorrow would bring another day of Jessica's impossible demands, Marcus's casual cruelty, and their friends' dismissive treatment. Maya didn't know how much more she could take before she broke completely. But she also didn't know how to escape without destroying David's relationship with his children or betraying the trust he'd placed in her to keep their marriage private. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Maya had no idea that everything was about to change, and that the next phone call she made would set in motion events that would transform her from invisible servant to untouchable queen in a matter of hours. Maya's hands trembled as she dialed David's number at 3 a.m, praying he would answer despite the time difference. When his familiar voice came through the phone, concerned and alert, something inside her finally broke. All the weeks of humiliation, fear, and loneliness poured out in desperate sobs that she couldn't control. "Maya, what's wrong? You sound terrified." David's voice was sharp with worry, and he could hear him moving around, probably getting dressed. Through broken whispers, Maya told him everything. The misconceived identity, the endless degrading tasks, Jessica's cruel comments about her appearance and worth, Marcus's entitled demands, and their friends treating her like she wasn't human. She described Jake's assault in the kitchen, the way they discussed her like property, and how she'd been relegated to a tiny guest room while strangers partied in what was legally her own home. David's breathing grew heavier with each detail, his voice getting tighter and more dangerous. "They did what to you?"
He kept interrupting, his disbelief transforming into cold fury. "Maya, this is not what I meant about keeping things private. This is completely unacceptable." "I know you wanted to tell them yourself," Maya whispered, "but David, I can't survive another day of this. They hate me, and they don't even know who I am. What happens when they find out the truth?" "I'm flying home tonight," David said, his voice deadly calm in a way Maya had never heard before. "Don't tell them anything. Don't give them any warning. Just stay safe until I get there. And Maya, none of this is your fault. What they've done is unforgivable." The next 18 hours crawled by like torture. Maya went through the motions of serving breakfast, cleaning rooms, and preparing for another of Jessica's social gatherings, but her mind was counting down the minutes until David's return. Jessica seemed to sense something different about Maya's demeanor and became even more critical than usual, finding fault with everything from how Maya folded towels to the way she arranged flowers in the dining room. "You seem distracted today," Jessica observed coldly as Maya set fresh linens in the guest bedroom. "I hope you're not getting too comfortable here. Remember, your employment is temporary, and frankly, your performance has been disappointing. Dad will need to make some changes when he returns." Maya bit her tongue and continued working, knowing that Jessica had no idea how dramatically everything was about to change. Marcus spent the day lounging by the pool with his friends, occasionally shouting demands for fresh drinks or clean towels, treating Maya like his personal servant, while he and his friends made crude jokes about her appearance and speculated about her personal life. That evening, as Maya was preparing dinner for another group of Jessica's friends, she heard the familiar sound of David's car in the driveway.
Her heart began racing, knowing that the next few minutes would determine everything. She continued stirring the sauce on the stove, trying to appear normal while her entire world was about to shift. David walked through the front door and immediately found Jessica in the living room, where she was setting up for cocktails with her friends. Maya could hear their voices from the kitchen, Jessica's bright and welcoming as she greeted her father, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. "Dad, what a wonderful surprise! You didn't tell us you were coming home early." Jessica's voice carried through the house, sickeningly sweet. "How was Singapore? You look tired. I hope the new housekeeper has been taking good care of the house while you were away." Maya heard David's response, carefully controlled, but with an edge that made her shiver. "Housekeeper? What housekeeper, Jessica?" "The woman you hired before you left." Marcus's voice joined the conversation as he came in from the pool area. "She's been here the whole time. Honestly, Dad, I think you might want to consider finding someone more qualified. She's not really up to our standards." Maya held her breath, knowing that this was the moment everything would change. She heard David's footsteps moving through the house, and then he appeared in the kitchen doorway. When he saw her standing there in an apron, looking exhausted and diminished, his face went completely white. She could see him taking in every detail, the way she'd lost weight, the dark circles under her eyes, the nervous way she held herself like she was expecting to be criticized. "My God, Maya," he whispered, reaching for her like she might disappear. "What have they done to you?" Before Maya could respond, Jessica appeared behind David, with Marcus close behind. "Oh, you've met our temporary housekeeper. She's been adequate, I suppose, though we've had to give her quite a bit of guidance. I hope you don't mind that we've been staying here while you were away. It seemed silly to let the house sit empty." The silence that followed was deafening. David stood perfectly still, his hands clenched at his sides, his eyes moving slowly from his daughter to his son to Maya. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet it was almost a whisper, but it carried more menace than any shout could. "Housekeeper. You think Maya is the housekeeper?" Jessica's confident smile began to falter. "Well, yes. Isn't she? I mean, that's what we assumed when we found her here. She never corrected us." David reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, scrolling until he found what he was looking for. He held up the screen so both Jessica and Marcus could see their wedding photo clearly. Maya in her ivory dress, David in his navy suit, both of them glowing with happiness outside the courthouse. "This housekeeper," David said, his voice getting louder now, "is my wife, Jessica. The woman you've been treating like garbage for the past month is my wife, the woman I love more than my own life, and the legal owner of this house." Jessica's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally, panic. Marcus just stared at the photo like it was written in a foreign language he couldn't read. "That's impossible," Jessica stammered, her composure completely shattered. "You would have told us. You would have had a real wedding. She can't be... She's just nobody special. She's just..." "Just what, Jessica?" His voice was rising now, years of controlled anger finally finding its target. "Just not good enough for your approval? Just not worthy of basic human decency? Just not deserving of respect in her own home?" Marcus found his voice, but it came out as a croak. "Dad, we didn't know. She never said anything. We thought she was hired help." David turned on his son with fury that made Maya step back instinctively. "So that makes it acceptable? Even if she had been hired help, that gives you the right to degrade her, humiliate her, and allow your friends to assault her?" The word assault hung in the air like a physical blow. Jessica went completely pale, while Marcus looked like he might be sick.
"I've heard everything," David continued, his voice deadly calm again.
Every cruel comment, every degrading task, every moment you made my wife feel worthless while living in her house, spending her money, and treating her like she was less than human. Maya watched as the full weight of their situation hit both Jessica and Marcus. They'd spent weeks tormenting the actual owner of everything they considered theirs. Every cruel laugh, every dismissive comment, every humiliating task had been directed at the woman who legally owned every piece of furniture they sat on, every bed they slept in, every meal they ate. David pulled out his phone again and dialed a number. "Mr. Patterson? It's David Blackwood. I need you to draw up eviction papers immediately. Yes, tonight. My children need to be out of my wife's house within 24 hours. He paused, listening to something on the other end. "No, there won't be any exceptions or extensions. They've forfeited any consideration they might have been entitled to." Jessica made a sound like a wounded animal. "Dad, please let us explain. We made a mistake, but we can fix this. We didn't mean to hurt anyone." "You didn't mean to hurt anyone?" David's laugh was bitter and cold. "You turned my wife into your personal servant. You humiliated her in front of your friends. You made her scrub floors and serve you dinner while you discussed how inadequate she was. You allowed your friend to assault her in her own kitchen. What part of that wasn't intentional cruelty?" Marcus tried a different approach, his voice desperate and pleading. "Uncle David, we're family. Mom wouldn't want you to throw us out over a misunderstanding. We can all live here together and work this out." David's expression grew even darker at the mention of his first wife. "Don't you dare bring your mother into this. She would be horrified by how you've behaved. She raised you better than this, and you've dishonored her memory with your cruelty." The next 24 hours passed in a frantic packing, desperate phone calls, and sobbing apologies that fell on deaf ears. Jessica tried everything from tears to anger to bargaining, but David remained unmoved. Marcus alternated between sullen silence and explosive outbursts about how unfair everything was. Maya watched it all from a distance, feeling like she was observing someone else's life. David had moved her back into their master bedroom, brought her tea and gentle meals, and spent hours just holding her while she processed everything that had happened. The contrast between his tender care and his children's months of cruelty was overwhelming. "I'm so sorry," David whispered into her hair as they lay in bed that first night. "I never imagined they were capable of something like this. I failed to protect you, and I'll never forgive myself for that." Maya found her voice for the first time in weeks. "You couldn't have known. I should have told them who I was, but I wanted to respect your wishes about privacy." "My wishes about privacy never included allowing you to be abused," David said firmly. "That's on me, not on you. You were trying to be a good wife, and they took advantage of your kindness." The eviction was swift and final. Security guards supervised as Jessica and Marcus packed their belongings, making sure they didn't try to take anything that didn't belong to them. Jessica cried as she loaded designer clothes into suitcases, while Marcus muttered about lawyers and wrongful eviction, though they both knew he had no legal standing. Their friends abandoned them immediately once word spread about what had happened. The same people who had enjoyed Maya's cooking and laughed at her expense suddenly wanted nothing to do with the siblings who had fallen from grace so spectacularly. Phone calls went unreturned, invitations stopped coming, and their social media followers began dropping away. Maya found herself torn between satisfaction and pity as she watched their world collapse. Jessica, who had built her entire identity around being David Blackwood's daughter and living in luxury, was suddenly faced with finding her own apartment and supporting herself. Marcus, who had never held a real job in his life, was forced to confront the reality of paying his own bills without his father's money. But Maya's focus wasn't on revenge. As she slowly recovered from the trauma of those terrible weeks, she found herself thinking about other women who might be in similar situations, trapped in homes where they were being mistreated with no way to escape or get help. She started volunteering at a local women's shelter, using her experience to help others who had been in abusive situations. David supported her completely, even helping fund expanded programs for the shelter. Maya discovered that her quiet strength, which had helped her survive Jessica and Marcus's cruelty, could be used to help other women find their own voices. Within 6 months, Maya had transformed from the invisible woman scrubbing floors to a confident advocate for women's rights. She spoke at fundraising events, sharing her story to help others understand how abuse could happen to anyone, anywhere. The scared librarian who had hidden in guest rooms was replaced by someone who refused to let anyone ever feel that powerless again. David watched his wife's transformation with amazement and pride. "You've become someone I never imagined you could be," he told her one evening as they reviewed applications for the shelter's latest program. "You took the worst experience of your life and turned it into something that helps thousands of other women." Maya smiled, thinking about the terrified woman who had called her husband from a bathroom floor just months earlier. Sometimes the people who try to break us end up giving us exactly the strength we need to soar. Jessica eventually found work as a receptionist at a small law firm, learning for the first time what it meant to work for someone else's approval rather than command it. Marcus took a job in retail, discovering the humility that comes with serving customers who treated him the way he had once treated others. Neither of them ever received forgiveness from their father, though Maya occasionally wondered if they had learned anything from their fall. She hoped they had, for their own sake as much as anyone else. David and Maya renewed their vows on their first anniversary, this time with a proper celebration surrounded by people who truly loved them. Maya's parents flew in from Portland, tears in their eyes as they watched their daughter marry not just a wealthy man, but a man who treasured her exactly as she was. The contrast between this celebration and their quiet courthouse wedding showed Maya how much they have both grown. The foundation she had started was now helping hundreds of women escape abusive situations, and Maya had found her true calling in life. As she stood in her beautiful home, now truly feeling like it belonged to her, Maya reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. The meek librarian who had once been invisible was now a force to be reckoned with, someone who commanded respect not through wealth or status, but through the strength she had discovered in her darkest moments. Sometimes the worst experiences in life become the foundation for the greatest triumphs. Sometimes the people who try to make us feel worthless end up teaching us just how valuable we really are. And sometimes when we think we've lost everything, we discover we were actually finding exactly who we were meant to be.